I actually, well, I had an experience as a child with a neighbor. At the time, I didn't realize what was happening, and I don't think I ever really processed what had happened until in high school when all my friends were kind of like they had boyfriends and they were starting to like explore sex and all of those types of things, but like totally unaware of what it was until many, many years later.
Um, the first time was in high school. It was probably middle school. I was waiting on the bus. I took the late bus. So I had to sit around for probably like half an hour, 45 minutes. And this boy who's older came up to me and like put me on his lap.
The first time was actually with a partner of mine that I had been dating for a while. There was an occasion where I was completely blackout drunk, and while I was asleep, he.
So I was in a show and I was 14 maybe, and there was this older guy who was in the cast, maybe in his early 20s, and he flirted and told me I was cute and paid me a lot of attention, so I loved it. Truthfully, a part of me liked having someone be interested in me because I always felt like I'm a dorky, weird kid and I don't attract that. So I remember like enjoying it and it was flirty, fun, back and forth. Well, he would always run. It was a 1,500 seater. It was a big theater, so he would exit on one side of the stage and quickly run around, which would take some time. And he would always try to catch a backstage quick change. Okay, so stuff like that wasn't totally appropriate. Like I'm 14, yeah, but I remember thinking like that was fun and silly, and I had a little crush on him. And then I saw him again when I was older, and it was Memorial Day. So there was a gathering, and it was at my sister's house, and he was there. And I remember being like, what? Like, what are you doing here? And it was kind of cool to catch up, and there was drinking, and yes, I was underage, but that doesn't make anything okay. But I remember my sister and I set up like an air mattress or something for me to sleep on one night in the basement. And it wasn't in a separate room, but it was in the basement where anyone could be, and I didn't think anything of it. So I ended up falling asleep in the basement on the couch, and I woke up to him.
And I woke, I like came to right after, and I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that I had like no clothes on and that he was leaving. I was like, what's going on? What's happening? And he was like, well, you said you wanted it, so it was fine. And I didn't even realize then that that was considered like rape because we had been like a couple. And it took me years to realize that. And even after that, there were other experiences that I had. I was at a party once and I was completely blackout drunk, and I actually walked out of the party and someone followed me. And then I came to in a parking garage. I didn't know what the person looked like. I didn't know what had happened. I just knew that it was a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend at this party. I just knew that.
The year that I, well, within the year that I came out, I dated somebody a few years older than me. And this was like back in 2016. He was very manipulative. And the one time that I can distinctly remember, although it's not the only time, we were working on a show together. And he was the director and I was the stage manager. And I would stay with him, because of rehearsals throughout the week and everything else that was going on during the day and night. And I decided this one day that I was just going to go home. And, I hadn't seen my family in a few days. I was just going to take the night. And I remember it was storming. And it was like thunderstorming. And he got very upset. And our cast was pretty small in size. And so when he got upset, like everybody was there. And it like caused some attention. And he just got so upset, like, why are you trying to go home? And, it's storming. And, you know, so I started crying. I got real emotional. And I remember his best friend was in the cast. And so he came up to me after and just made sure that I was okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'll just go home with him. It is storming. He's right. And so we both got into our separate cars and drove to his house. It was late. I think it was like 11 o'clock. So we went upstairs and we got ready for bed. And I was still upset. Like, I was confused, anxious, nervous. And I just wanted to go to bed. And he rolled over and asked me, do you want to have sex? And I really didn't feel like doing it. And so I told him, no, I don't feel like I want to do that right now. And he just threw a fit. He got so upset and like thought that I was going to break up with him and all these other different things. And I just like reassured him, no, I'm not trying to break up with you or anything like that. And he just kept nagging and nagging and nagging and nagging until...
So I was with this guy for a really long time. And he was just like literally the epitome of like, he was an awful person. And sometimes he would come in at the end of the night and just like being all over me, like no matter how I felt or if I wanted it, he would guilt me into it. And I think coercion is such a huge thing. I don't think it's talked about enough. I don't think people understand that. If you're coerced into doing something, that still counts. And there were days where I just did not want to have sex with him. And he would come in and sit there and be like, I'm sexually frustrated. He said, that's an actual thing, right? It affects your mental health being too sexually frustrated and too sexually wound up. Hey, I'm struggling right now. And just making it seem like it's my fault, and that I needed to have sex with him so that he could be okay. And he was abusive too. So it became situations where I would let him do it to avoid being abused. And I would just like give in, regardless of how I felt or how I wanted it. And just being touched all over, and like I would wake up and his hands would be on me.
And I remember being like, well, I've always liked him, and now and I kept pushing his hand away. Like, we were kissing, and I kept saying, I did say no several times, yeah. But like, I remember being so confused because I was like, yes, we had been drinking, I know. I didn't go to bed with him, that was very clear. I remember thinking it was okay because I had always liked him, even though I was saying no. I was doing verbal and nonverbal no's. And the next thing you know, he was...
And then probably a little bit over a year ago, a few friends and I were sitting around, and it turned into, it was just me and another person here. And we started to, I revoked consent halfway through, but he did not listen. And
it was November of my freshman year, and I was at a party with some of my former sorority sisters and my roommate, and there was this guy there that I had previously talked to on the dating app Tinder. And he was like, are you gonna be at this party? And I was like, yeah, I mean, guess I'll see you there. And we went there. And he was so drunk, and I wasn't drinking because I was with my Greek life sisters, and sorry, I'm forgetting to breathe. came up to me immediately and he was like all up on me and he was just grabbing me and touching me, and I was like, and eventually I got away. But then a few hours later, he came up to me again and was like, come on, like, let's go back to my apartment, like, let's leave. And I was like, no, like, I don't know you like that, like, I don't feel comfortable with that, I don't want to leave. And then he grabbed me by the wrist and he yanked me up and he put his hands.
And then I had another experience last year, around this time, like last year. And I wasn't really able to identify what had happened at the time. But looking back, now I was able to define what had happened, and I realized I had been raped twice. But the first time we were hanging out, and he just kind of kept pushing me, and I kept saying, no, I don't want to, like, I'm good, like, no, and he wasn't listening to me and just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and I kept saying, no, I don't want to, and eventually I caved and I gave in, and there was absolutely no consideration for me at that point. I was just an object to him, and he had an agenda, and he was not seeing me as a human being, and it was really hard because he just clearly didn't care. But at that time, I wasn't able to identify what had happened, so I kept seeing him. And it happened a couple of other times. And then one day he slept over at my apartment, and I woke up the next morning to him like...
Are you waiting for it?
Waiting for us to get to the moment? The big moment?
You want to know what happened? You want to know exactly what was done to me?
We're not going to tell you.
We're not going to tell you.
We're not
Going to just
Give that to
We're
you.
not going to just give that to you.
Because I don't know you, and you haven't earned it.
because those moments are mine to decide what to do with.
Because if you're here for just that, you are missing the point.
Because I still can't say all of it out loud without panicking.
Because I don't feel safe.
because I don't owe you anything.
Because he doesn't get to have that power over me anymore.
Have you read any of the articles? Have you noticed that every single article coming out about what's happening spell it out for you? All of them. Calling people like us Jane Doe to protect the survivor. But do you know what that means?
It means you have these nameless, faceless women. It means you don't think about who they are.
Jane Doe.
Jane Doe.
Jane Doe.
Jane Doe number 4.
Jane Doe number 8.
A name that has ceased to have meaning with a number attached to it. That means that you get to know in graphic detail the worst moments of their lives. You get to know everything that was done to them. You get to know all of the horrible things that they've had to endure. And you get to know all of that without having to think of them as a human being.
It means you get to separate the assault from the person. It means you get the privilege of closing the article and moving on with your day.
We don't